From what I've heard about, y'all's practice, that is one of the attractive things about your practice is that you have a lot of different types of treatment and therapy available kind of under one roof. And that helps us as lawyers, I think, because I don't want to be the quarterback of my client's treatment. I mean, I don't think that's really the proper thing to do. And so where there's one kind of central source of being able to kind of direct the care and everything is very helpful just for the client and the lawyer.
The Concussion Center proudly presents Talk-N-Headz, a podcast based on all things related to head injuries. This is not just a show about concussion. In this series, we take an in-depth look at the brain and its function specifically after there is trauma. Hosted by Brent Jones, Antonio Walden, and Dr. Robert Allen. Talk-N-Headz was created to give a realistic perspective to head injuries. So sit back, relax, and let us fill your head with brain knowledge.
I know we mentioned DTI earlier, but outside of DTI, what's one piece of technology around head injuries that you are really excited to see coming to the forefront?
Well, I guess it kind of goes along with the DTI, but I love the neuroquant testing. I know that that's something that, I guess is done through the MRI too, but, that's what measures the symmetry between the lobes to determine maybe where specifically in the lobes there are some abnormalities. And I think that it's super helpful and convincing for a jury, way beyond even just like the DTI, because you're able to match up to the jury, the findings on the neuroquant and the lobes that the abnormalities are found in with the functions that that lobe, controls. And you can match that up with the symptoms that the patient or the client is having. And so I thought in my trial that was a hugely persuasive piece of evidence for us to be able to use that neuroquant along with the subjective complaints.
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah. That information is extremely, extremely important. And as technology from an imaging standpoint becomes more and more readily available and is obviously enhancing over the years, I think it will also provide a lot more insight from that structural damage. Which obviously what an MRI or imaging is looking at the structural damage.
Gotcha. Dr. Allen, last time we were talking, you mentioned some new technology around headaches that you were looking into.
Yeah, there's some new things that we look more at the management of headaches from transcranial modulation. There's something called Cephaly is one device. It's a neuromodulator, so it uses very, very, very low electrical stimulation to try and help manage some of these pain issues that patients have. The nice thing about it is available for use at home. Get one, get prescribed one, put it on your head at home. If you start to have a headache, you don't have to take any meds or anything like that. So it's another option for these headaches that patients are having, where they don't necessarily have to rely on medication. And that being said, medication for headaches is always, it's not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a different route for people to take because, rightfully so, some people don't want to try meds for everything. So,
yeah. So,
go
ahead, Brent.
I was just going to ask, do you see something like that device simulation? Do you see that becoming more the norm as research develops in head injuries for treatment for looking at different areas of treatment?
That's a great question. I think it depends a lot on the person, right? Headaches are very, very unique animals, especially migraines, just because how they affect people is so different. So I would like to see it become more readily available and more accepted. I just think that one of the hurdles is, of course, going to be just getting it out to the general population. Is it easier for a doctor to treat a migraine with, a prescription for an abortive medication or preventative medication, or is it easier for them to write a script and then, patients got to go online, purchase a device kind of thing. So I think it's good to present the options to patients. Hopefully patients will be, accepting of that new technology that comes out. And we see some real benefit from it. So I think it's a little too early on in the game to say right now, but I would love to see it become more readily available and more used with patients.
Agreed.
So, question, Dr. Allen. I've been reading a couple articles, and they've been saying that things like fatty fishes are brain foods. Is that really a scientifically sound statement to make?
I mean, yes. Omega-3 is is very, very good for you. Omega-3 is great. The other thing that we use a lot is B12 vitamin. So B12 vitamin is very, very helpful for people that are going through cognitive issues, cognitive function, memory problems. So there's a lot of things out there that we can try and use that are more on the, let's call it holistic side of things, right? Not a compounded medication, but we typically here will try B12 with patients to see if that does help with cognitive function. B12 is one of those things that can fluctuate wildly in people's bodies, and it's not often diagnosed initially, right? You can see it down the road once people start ruling out other things. I mean, great example, we had a family friend that started having extreme cognitive issues, right? This guy's a dentist, smart, healthy, and slurring his words, having some facial drooping, started having drop foot, all this kind of stuff. B12 deficiency was all it was. Okay, got his B12 back up, and he was ready to rock and roll. So we can see how important it is in the function of the body, and especially in the case of a head injury. One of those reasons potentially being, right, with a TBI or traumatic brain injury, we have a higher need for the brain to have these different things that it needs to, it's, for lack of a better term, eat, right, to keep its energy up there. But in the initial stages, we've got a lower threshold of food coming to the brain. Okay, so we can kind of boost that a little bit, then that can help patients tremendously. I mean, we look at caloric intake for moderate and severe TBI patients, and when they're inpatient, we typically recommend at least a 40% increase in their daily caloric intake, just because of the amount of nutrients that they're going to need in those initial stages.
Gotcha. And I brought that up because my secret informant also told me that Attorney Schneider is always at UMI. So I was just wondering if the sushi intake would be a beneficial factor.
It's increasing the brain power over there.
What I'll say is this: if we start getting gift cards from UMI, then yeah, I'll recommend it for sure. I would never do that. Never do that.
So if the next podcast is sponsored by UMI, we know we did a good job.
That's funny. I have a question for Bethany. In your opinion, Bethany, is having clients not only diagnosed, but actually going through treatment and showing improvement in their symptoms, do you feel like that is important to a case? If it was a client that you were representing, so not only having the diagnostic portions to identify, what the diagnosis may be at that point in time, but actually going through a treatment regimen, whether it's therapies of some sort to over extended period of time, and then getting retested, is that important to the outcome of a TBI case, in your opinion?
So obviously, because we're dealing with real people in these cases, you always want them to be able to get the best care and treatment, and their health is the first priority. And that's how I usually approach it, because I don't want to be making medical decisions based on the case. I want them to do what they can do to get better. I would say for our TBI cases that have significant value, they're the ones that can be shown that there was, a vast amount of, a number of different treatment options provided to the patient. However, the person's not getting better. And that, a doctor can say to a reasonable degree of medical certainty that this is kind of what the status for the rest of the person's life. And in fact, most likely the person will continue to deteriorate over time with age and have an increased risk for Alzheimer's and dementia. I think that is probably the most valuable of case. Now, do I want my clients to find out that they're never better? No. And so clearly, if there are treatment options, I always encourage my clients to do any treatment options that are given to them. Number one for the case, or number one for their health, but also for the case, because I think that if you're offered treatment options and you don't do it, then I think that looks bad. Certainly I do think that a traumatic brain injury is more valuable when there have been a lot of, like, there have been a number of issues identified in a lot of different types of treatment, recommended, right? I think that my traumatic brain injuries where I have the person is recommended for cognitive rehab, vestibular rehab, ENT for tinnitus, counseling for, anxiety, depression. Those are the cases that I say, oh, well, I think, I can show that, that this is, really affecting, a broad spectrum of the client's life and functioning. So I do think that, it's helpful to kind of have, versus I think what you're saying, which is just the person goes to the neurologist and offered medicine,
Yeah.
Definitely having a broader scope of referrals and a broader scope of treatment actually, for each specific symptom they're experiencing is very helpful in identifying all the different ways that this is impacting their functioning.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously we want to, in all these cases, you want to do what's most important for the patient. So we completely understand that doing a thorough diagnosis of the patient and making any and all available recommendations that hopefully the patients do, act on those recommendations, so that they can, hopefully improve their quality of life over time.
And I think that, from what I've heard about, y'all's practice, that is one of the attractive things about your practice is that you have a lot of different types of treatment and therapy available kind of under one roof. And that helps us as lawyers, I think, because I don't want to be the quarterback of my client's treatment. I mean, I don't think that that's really the proper thing to do. And so where there's one kind of central source of being able to kind of direct the care and everything is very helpful just for the client and the lawyer.
Yeah, we completely agree. And that's obviously one of the reasons why we focused on our facility. We still have some growing to do, right? There's some other areas that we want to get really, we want to be experts in and we want to grow in. But, we're just excited to be able to work with attorneys, like yourself, who are really putting the patients first and are understanding that these are real world problems. And we appreciate not you just obviously joining the podcast and talking with us today, but being an advocate for head injuries and being an advocate for these patients and these types of injuries, because in our opinion, it sounds like we all share, they have been, underdiagnosed for years and years and years. And I think we all have our opinions on why that may be the case, and maybe all our opinions are correct in that, but it's exciting to see that people are finally starting to shine a light on this underserved population, if you will.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that about sums it up. Does anybody have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to ask Bethany. Bethany, do you have anything for us? I mean, obviously we've been grilling you with a question too. Sorry, the sunlight is like absolutely creeping on me here, so I'm just like moving around my dining room right now. Any questions that you have for us that we could help you out with?
I guess. Well, it's just an interesting issue in what I see kind of from the legal perspective in the legal case that I get asked about a lot versus what you guys might think, from the medical perspective. But a big thing that I get asked about is like, well, what can we be doing early on, to identify these? And my answer usually is, well, because 90 to 95% of these get better over time, I don't necessarily know that it's in the best interest of the client or the patient to go get a bunch of treatment for something that could resolve on its own. And so what I typically recommend is go get the initial diagnosis of a concussion. Have somebody that you're reporting on a consistent basis, your continued symptoms over that course of time. Then at the year mark, if you're still experiencing, these kinds of symptoms, if they're still interfering with your life, that's when I would, really kind of go full steam ahead in getting the treatment for what's potentially a permanent injury. I guess from a medical perspective, is that something you guys agree with, or do you have a difference of opinion in that?
The sooner we can get our hands on a patient, the better their outcomes are going to be. So we know that, for example, the return to work, return to play, some of the most valuable stuff for that is how quickly can they be diagnosed, and how quickly can they start progressing through kind of a regular, for lack of a better term, regular battery of therapies, right? You are absolutely spot on with the 90-95% of these get better, right? We typically start to see our patients here after 30 days, because now we have a time frame of, okay, it's been 30 days, the patient's not getting better. Let's start talking about doing something, right? One of the things that we run into is we love getting patients in the week that an accident happened. However, like you said, a lot of these things are going to resolve. Can we diagnose you with PTSD? No. Can we diagnose you with an anxiety disorder? No. So can we diagnose you with whiplash? Sure. But does that mean your dizziness is coming from that or somewhere else, right? We can start to do these things, but it does limit us just a little bit, because so much of this will resolve on its own. Now, we do want to get folks better, right? And I think that it's I think it is something that people in the medical side of things need to be better about saying, do these things and see if you start getting better, right? Start doing these kind of therapies. A big thing that we use is basically, right, I want you to, it's kind of like what can make your symptoms happen, right? So if you say that when I get up and I walk around for 5 minutes, then I start to get dizzy, or I feel like my memory's going, or something like that, right? Okay,
triggers.
What's that?
Identifying the triggers.
Exactly, right? So if that's your threshold, then what do we want to do? We want to get you right under that threshold and see if we can start moving that time frame, further out. So now it's 10 minutes until symptoms start. Now it's 15, as well as lessen the symptoms when they happen, right? That's our return to work, return to play, kind of at the get-go. So, intensive therapies of sessions of cognitive function therapy, of intensive vestibular or balance rehab, those kind of things. You're right. We need to give that a chance to see what's going to happen. So I would say, though, excuse me, I would like to see patients just a little bit earlier on in the process. And the other thing too that we run into so much is people get in an accident and they just go home. They don't want to go to the ER. They don't want to deal with it. This will get better. Well, it's been 6 or 8 weeks. I still feel terrible. Let's go see somebody, so it's kind of a mixture, I think, of all of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it. Any other questions, Bethany, you got for us?
No, I think that's it. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
We thank you for taking the time out to talk with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Antonio, are you going to reveal the source or what? I mean,
I think I know.
I think I might have to call you after.
I don't reveal my sources, sir.
Uh-huh.
If I reveal my sources, I no longer will have sources.
It sounds like you just talked to the hostess at Umi. It sounds like what you did.
No.
Is that what it was?
No,
I'm
one
glad
person
you
gave
didn't
me
give away any worse secrets.
Yeah, this is true.
No, I specifically asked for things that would be fun to talk about. So I kept those secrets out of the mix.
Georgia and Umi are definitely good things.
Yes. The last thing I want to do is have an attorney of your caliber and I be on their bad side. So I'm a smart man. Well,
but
guys,
if you need some stuff on Antonio, just let us know. I mean, it's pretty easy.
How many of us have them?
His rap sheet is pretty bad. How'd you get hired anyways?
Ones we can depend on.
That's right.
Oh man, well, I appreciate you guys' time. I'll let you get back into your day. This has been another episode of the Talk-N-Headz, and everybody out there listening, watch your head.
Thank you for listening to Talk-N-Headz. This podcast has been brought to you by the Concussion Center. We appreciate the opportunity to fill your brain with some new information regarding head injuries. If you have any additional topics you would like us to cover, please reach out to us on our various social media platforms at the Concussion Center or hit us up on our website at concussionctr.com.